Welcome back to a brand new edition of the MMA Beat. It is Thursday, June 15th, 2017. Hello again, everyone. I'm Ariel Helwani. Once again, not inside our New York City studio. As you can clearly see, Luke and I are both away this week. Last week, we told you we were going to be off, but of course, some massive news broke yesterday. By now, you know, Floyd Mayweather Jr. is going to be fighting Conor McGregor in a boxing match August 26th. In Las Vegas, Nevada. And so we said to ourselves, yes, we can't be in the studio. Yes, we know you don't love my connection or my sound. And Luke has this very professional setup at home. But we want to give you a show. We want to talk about it because there's so much to break down here. So here we are, second week in a row, a sort of remote edition of the MMA Beat. Luke, how are you?
I'm tired. I'm already exhausted with Mayweather-McGregor talk, but the train rolls on. I'm doing well, I guess.
Oh, it has just begun, my friend. We are just 2.5 months away from this actually happening. You know, they kind of pulled the trigger quickly. They're not going to make us wait all that long. This is what we know right now. It's going down August 26th. It's going to be a boxing match. It's going to be 12 rounds, 154 pounds. It's going to be on Showtime pay-per-view, distributed on Showtime pay-per-view, that is. The UFC really doesn't have a say as far as the promotion is concerned. It's really a Mayweather promotion / Showtime event. It's almost shades of Dana White going with Chuck Liddell to Pride back in the day and just kind of loaning out his guy. Of course, they are going to be making money off it. It's going to be taking place at the T-Mobile Arena. Those are basically the facts as we know them right now, and a lot more is about to come out as far as press conferences and Barker shows and things like that. But let's go back to yesterday. Let's go back to Wednesday afternoon when, you know, this atomic bomb drops and a news story really that we had been talking about. We were sort of anticipating it was going to come out for quite some time. But when the reality sunk in, when you saw the Instagram post, when you saw the press conference, you know, Leonard Ellerbe of Mayweather Promotions and Dana White and Steven Espinoza coming together, you know, really making this a thing. Let's just go back to that point. What were you thinking?
I know it's the common thing on the internet to say, well, I'm not surprised by any of this, or to say there was too much money to make this, or, you know, we all knew this was coming. That's a very cynical and, well, not even cynical, it's a reasonable thing to say, but I'm sorry. I don't know that I'm alone when I say I am surprised. I really, really am surprised. You know, maybe Nate Diaz isn't surprised. I am, you know. You know, when the Mayweather-Pacquiao went down and they combined the Showtime and HBO production crews and the commentary crews and the worlds came together, you knew they're willing to move mountains for things that mountains should be moved for. Nevertheless, just to see these guys on the same call, knowing what Dana has said about Mayweather, knowing that Mayweather is all of his history, and then there's Steven Espinoza, the Showtime intermediary, who, by the way, has had his own issues with Dana White. And then they all just come together for this bizarre moment in time for a fight that everyone on one side swears is a money grab, and they might be right. On the other side, everyone says, who cares? I just want to see what happens, and maybe they're right too. It's I said this yesterday on my radio show. You know this too, man. There are times when you're watching this sport and you can just feel that the moment you're in is historically significant. You just know it. There's something off about it. Not off as in terrible necessarily, but just not usual. And yesterday felt like that. That is not something you're going to see very often. And I legitimately walked away from that and went to bed yesterday being like, wow, I am legitimately shocked.
You know when I know that moment is upon us? When you get all these sports talk radio shows hitting you up. That's really my indication. Like when Conor retired, that happened. You know, when Brock Lesnar came back or tested. Like there are certain moments when the sport crosses over. Of course, it's never crossed over in a bigger way than now with Conor fighting Floyd. Let me ask you about some of the details. Does anything, talk about surprise, anything stick out? 154 pounds, 12 rounds, any of the details that came out, the fact that they did it in August, which, you know, historically isn't a Mayweather pay-per-view month, and we know about the issues with Canelo and Triple G being on September 16th. Any of the little details that came out that really were like, okay, for you, this is somewhat surprising here?
Two things. The weight, 154 pounds. That's not Mayweather's natural weight. Now, that's not, I guess it is Conor's natural weight, but Mayweather has fought that high when he fought Canelo, and obviously he did quite well. But typically speaking, he's a 147-pound guy, and you think to yourself, well, Conor made 145. I thought they were going to have this at 147. Nope, they're not. Now, when you go to 154, that legally requires you in Nevada to go to 10-ounce gloves, so that's part of the deal. That was the first one. The other one was Chris Mannix had an interesting article yesterday on Yahoo, and he sort of pointed out that in April, everything seemed to have stalled with the talks, or at least they were just not really heading in enough of the right direction. But then you talked to everyone yesterday, and I think there's something to be said for that. Something happened around April or May, and maybe you know better than I do, where it just put everything on the fast track, and the way that they were able to undercut by going first against Triple G versus Canelo, a great fight in its own right, but now they've got that September fight, and I'm not exactly sure. I'm sure some people will buy it. I'm sure it will do well, but that takes a massive hit as a consequence. And they were able to just sort of, it seemed like at the very end, once they all got on the same page, whatever that took, it was just smooth sailing from there on out. So a weird way in which everything kind of just sort of stalled a little bit and then greased lightning at the end, that caught my attention.
So is this good for MMA? Like, let's look at it from our perspective here, because, it's another fascinating thing, as we've talked about on the beat in the past. Our worlds are colliding. We're on a conference call yesterday, and there's Dan Rafael. We're not usually on conference calls with the boxing guys. So it really feels like this is going to be an MMA versus boxing debate, even though Steven Espinoza of Showtime Sports said yesterday this isn't a referendum on MMA versus boxing. It does kind of feel like come August 26th, the MMA fans will be sitting there saying, Conor, do this for us. That's what I kind of gather here. They may be cynical about it now. They may hate the fact that it's $100. They may hate the fact that he's not fighting Tony Ferguson. But come that night, they will all be watching, and I feel like the hardcore MMA fans will deep down inside be pulling for Conor. So let me ask you, the fact that this fight is being made, and it's not a UFC fight, and it's a strict boxing fight, just the fact that we're here, and it's UFC star Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather, is this good for MMA?
I don't know. I don't know. I really don't. I think there's so many factors here that we have to weigh that we can't weigh until this is all over. I believe fundamentally the fight complexion will tell us a lot about what the lesson here was, about whether this was a good idea or a bad one, whether this is bad for boxing or good, whether it's bad for MMA or good. In terms of that tribal sense you're speaking to, I absolutely think that's real. And look, I'll be honest, as a media member, I'm not rooting for Conor to win or lose. I don't care either way, but I am thinking to myself, please don't do something that would badly affect MMA. I think that's unlikely. It would require something borderline catastrophic, right? To be disqualified in some kind of terribly unprofessional way, or to get stretched in the first round. I don't think either of these things are likely, to be honest. But that's what I'm concerned about. And I think you'll see a lot of other media members say the same thing, because, look, here's what's going to happen in the course of this buildup. You know this as well as I do. The boxing guys are absolutely going to take shots at MMA. It's just going to happen, right? And in turn, there's going to be some unfair criticism inside MMA circles of boxing. But to answer the question about is this good or it's bad, look, it's certainly good for media. Boy, we got our work cut out for us for the next 2.5 months, don't we? It's going to be super ridiculous traffic on our websites and on our radio shows and everything else. It's going to be a lot. So it's good for us in the short term. The long-term question, I just don't think we have enough evidence yet to really say this has been a win or a bust or something in between.
Do you think that if the UFC was enjoying some amazing year and they just had 4 great pay-per-views in a row and blockbuster fights and Ronda fought and all this stuff, do you think that they would have done this? Or, as a boxing/MMA journalist asked on the conference call yesterday, Brian Campbell of CBS, and was somewhat aggressively shut down by Dana White, the loan, the debt, the sale, all that stuff and more plays into all of this.
I know, and Dana goes, if you're going to ask a stupid question, ask it right. I don't even know what that means. Like, if it's a stupid question, how right does it need to be?
Sure.
All right, whatever. I have my doubts, man. I really have my doubts. If Ronda was still out there just tearing people to pieces and was this mega star, would they be doing it? I think the real question here to me is, now look, the Mayweather circumstance is just unusual, where he's going to make $100 million or something like that. But let's say there was another star inside the UFC that Conor could fight in a reasonable way. Let's say a St. Pierre, but let's say St. Pierre and them could get together and ultimately produce, let's say, $50 million revenue for each of them. Yeah? That's their take-home. Would there be this talk of wanting to do that? I don't think that there would be. And I think the big lesson here is that the UFC machine has been built to create stars over the years. And they've had some big ones, the Liddells, the Rampages, the Rouseys, and the list goes on. But they've never, ever, I don't think were ever built to scale for someone like this. They never had the infrastructure or the anticipation that someone could get so big that the next biggest star didn't even exist in their organization and he would have to go elsewhere. I think that, and I don't know that that's necessarily an indictment on the UFC. I mean, how easy is it to create these? But to me, it's like they want guys who can get that one, maybe at most 2 million pay-per-view mark. But we're talking here, I'm sure we'll get to this, 3, maybe this does 4, I don't know. The buzz yesterday was crazy. And so I just don't think they were ever anticipating someone getting this size, and they don't know what to do with it, so this is the best way to manage it.
So some people have been asking me, why would the UFC do this? Like, just from a risk-reward perspective, because, okay, if he loses, could he embarrass the UFC? I don't subscribe to that. But if he wins, there's definitely a fear, I think, that, A, he doesn't come back, there's a rematch, he pursues, other big boxing fights where maybe he can make more money, etc. Dana White said yesterday he's confident that Conor will return by the end of the year. I know that they've sort of earmarked that December 30th date, that last pay-per-view of the year, to have him come back, possibly to fight a Tony Ferguson or a Nate Diaz. Do you think that they are playing with fire here? Yes, they need something big. Yes, this is the biggest thing that WME IMG can get as far as their UFC purchase this year thus far. But August 27th and beyond, will they regret this? Will they regret letting him go out and do this? Because we have to note, they had to let him do this. They could have stood in the way of this happening, and at some point along the way, they said, no, we're going to play ball here and we're going to make it into a reality. But they could have said, hell no, we'll go to court instead. Do you think that they will ultimately regret letting their biggest star go out and do something else?
Well, again, this all depends on what happens, but let's center the conversation for just a second on whether or not he does that second fight this year, and that one being in the UFC against whoever that ends up being. Conor McGregor is a guy I actually trust a lot more than a lot of other fighters, and I'm sure he didn't sign anything and was probably just verbally committal. But let's think about who Conor McGregor is for a second and what Dana White has been saying about him. Now, Dana White's been using it to bash many of his other fighters, but he has been saying very correct things about Conor McGregor. When guys fell out, he just took the next one up and fought him, and more often than not, did quite well. And he is a guy who has talked about, look, I'm going to get mine. You're going to pay me what I'm owed, but I believe in the value of maintaining a partnership. I believe in the value of honoring commitments to another person or an entity that I have a bond with. And so if he's verbally committing to that, I think the only way he doesn't do it is if something physically traumatic happens to him in the Mayweather fight, which I don't find to be necessarily likely. Just think about it. There's lots of ways to lose. You can lose split decision, unanimous, you can get KO'd, or, it's just relatively one-sided, something like that. If it's like that and he walks away and he's not too beat up, I suspect you will see him back because I think he probably said, I owe them this. They gave me the opportunity to go get this big money. Let me go reward them. After that, all bets are off.
One of the things that really interests me about this whole endeavor is the broadcast team, because it is a Showtime pay-per-view. But I thought it was interesting that yesterday, when asked on the conference call, Steven Espinoza didn't commit to a broadcast team thus far. We do know that their typical boxing broadcast team is Mauro Ranallo, who coincidentally this past week just signed a deal with Bellator, Paulie Malignaggi and Al Bernstein. But these are different times, and they said they're going to sit down and do what's right. And there could be maybe an MMA guy, a Joe Rogan, I don't know, a Brian Stan, a Dominic Cruz, a Dana Cormier. Who the heck knows? If you're in charge, what's the team? You got 3 guys. Who are you putting in that booth?
Man. This is another one. Were you shocked when he said that?
I feel like if this was a strict boxing match, the biggest boxing match that they could put on, he's like, yeah, this is our team. It's obvious they're going to be the guys. But I feel like everyone's trying to play nice. You could sense like everyone, Ellerby, Dana, Espinoza, they have a history. And these 3 guys, you won't get this analogy, but other fans will. It reminded me to a degree of when Eric Bischoff and Vince McMahon hugged on Monday Night Raw. Bitter rivals coming together, for the sake of money, right? For business. And so it all felt like they were on their P's and Q's yesterday, all giving each other, glowing compliments and saying how easy this was and how enjoyable it was, which is great. I'm happy to hear. So I don't think that Espinoza necessarily wanted to speak out of turn. I would imagine he has an idea in his mind who he would like to be there, but I feel like it's going to be a collaborative effort to a certain degree.
Okay, I was surprised by that. I mean, let's just talk about Morrow for a second. I cannot imagine how they could do that. I mean, I guess I can imagine. It would be outright negligent to not let Morrow do that commentary. I mean, I'm sure they could find someone who's good. I don't mean that. I mean, there's plenty of good broadcasters out there, but given who Morrow is, given his history, given that he had to take a back seat at Mayweather-Pacquiao because they also did that combined group,
yep.
I don't know how Morrow wouldn't be insulted. I mean, he's the most uniquely qualified guy literally in the world to do that broadcast. So I'd like to see him. Interestingly, a lot of folks may not remember this. Al Bernstein also called MMA on Showtime with Steven Quadros back in the Show XC days. Remember I forget his full name. Remember Kala Hose?
Mm-hmm.
I think he called one of his fights from Hawaii.
Yep.
And actually did a really good job. So I wouldn't mind if he was on that call. Paulie Malignaggi, to me, is an absolutely superb commentator. But are you really going to have 4 people if they bring in someone like Joe Rogan? I don't know. I don't know how that would work. That, to me, seems a little bit odd, how you would pair up the desk and the commentary booth. I would say Paulie, maybe Joe, and Morrow would be a combination to my liking. But Al being in there, the regular crew would be fine with me. But I think what they want is they want to get Joe in on the action because of how, to your point, unique the circumstances are.
Let me ask you a question fan to fan here, okay? I know this is the journalism show, but let's just talk fans.
All right.
You've been watching this sport a long time. I've been watching it. I think we have a deep passion for the sport. We love it. I mean, heck, I'm sort of on vacation right now, and I'm doing this, and I'm very happy to be doing it. Are you excited? Are you excited about this? I woke up today and I was like, I can't believe this is happening. Like, this is the fight of the century. This could be the biggest event that we ever cover. And I've been to the Olympics. You've been to Pacquiao Mayweather. You've been to a bunch of stuff. I've been to a bunch of stuff. I am genuinely excited. It's rare. Sometimes you have to go cover an event. You're doing it. It's your job. You have to do a show. You're doing it. It's your job. But I feel like I've never been a kid on Christmas because I don't celebrate Christmas, but I feel like this is what Christmas morning. I'm excited, and I don't think that's a bad thing to say. And I know it's cool to be cynical and to crap on all this. I am very excited to just watch this. We'll hold on covering it because I want to ask you that as a journalist, but as a fan, as someone who's been watching combat sports, are you excited about this?
Yeah, I am. To that point, I mean, when they announced it yesterday, I immediately thought, not that no one cares about Jones Cormier, but I don't know how you felt. It immediately changed my summer because now there's this thing at the end of it, and everything before it will be about it. Like, your whole summer feels different now for me, as I think of both a fan and a journalist, right? So I was excited about that. The one thing I'm worried about, and I know this is more of a coverage question, but after Mayweather-Pacquiao, I had a couple big takeaways, but one of them was, I'll never forget, man. I was sitting there in the MGM Grand outside Studios A and B. That's right near that food court, if you've ever been there. And I saw all the guys coming in with their tickets to go watch the fight. And I'll never forget, I looked at him, and there was not a fight fan in that group, man. It looked like all the venture capitalists on Silicon Valley, the show. It was the least fight-friendly atmosphere ever. It was so artificial, right? And I remember the fight kind of sucked because it was supposed to have been made a while ago. I mean, I didn't think it sucked as much as other people did, but it wasn't great, right? And then it was all over, and then you had to ask yourself, what was the point of this, man? Like, what were we doing here? And in the end, I kind of decided maybe that was a fight that had to happen, even late, but it just felt like, and I talk about this all the time when we talk about rankings in the UFC, the best way to carry forward a sport is just to do it by basically the rule book. Right, you have contenders. Contenders should fight champions. Champions should defend their titles, and there should be a relatively decent ranking system in between. That's really what this should be about. Because once you start getting off the path, you become a mercenary to money. You become the slave to bizarre curiosity. And what I don't want to happen at the end of this, and maybe it will inevitably, what I don't want to happen at the end of this is to feel like, dude, what was the point of this, man? Like, what were we here for? This was so not real. We just wasted our time. We wasted their time. I don't want people to look at the media after the fact and say, you were the guys who were supposed to be telling us that this was nonsense, and I don't want to be accused of dereliction of duty. That's sort of where I'm concerned.
And so on paper, you look at 49-0 versus 0-0 in boxing, and you know about Floyd's amateur record and his Olympic record. I mean, on paper, you know, the deck is stacked against Conor, and I understand when I see people, respected media members, Jeremy Schaap, who tweeted about it yesterday, who I thought was, I thought was on point with his tweet, but who are we to say right now what's to happen? But my point is, like, what do you say to those people who do say right now this is going to be a sham, that it's going to be a blowout, that I can't believe you guys are devoted, because you will hear this. Why are you devoting time to this? This is a money grab. It's absolutely ludicrous. It's all these things and more. Conor should be fighting, Tony Ferguson. Floyd should be fighting Triple G. I can't believe he's going to break the record, 50-0 against a guy who's 0-0. I mean, there's a lot that can be said. I'm just saying, as a fan, I'm excited because I like spectacles. I like to take part. This is something that will probably never happen in our lifetime. The last time something of this magnitude, where it was a mixed fight, so to speak, was maybe Ali Inoki, 40 years ago, and our friend and colleague Josh Gross wrote a wonderful book about that, and I suggest people check it out. But what do you say to those people that want to crap all over this now? You're right, or could there be something to say, like, enjoy the ride? What could we say? Because there's so many ranges of emotions, and I kind of feel like everyone's right. You know what I mean?
Exactly. You took the words right out of my mouth. I feel like everybody has a point. On the most cynical end, you've got people being like, this fight is dog-ass, what a money grab, you guys are complete jokes for even talking about this. It's like, well, there's something to be said for that. On the other hand, you have people saying, you know what? Okay, I understand the deck is stacked against Conor, but this is when he shines best, and he is younger, and Floyd's 40, and he's been off 2 years. And hey, maybe I don't think Conor's chances are all that great, but I want to see. I can't wait to see it. I'm a big believer. I just want to see what happens. I understand that too. And this is sort of my point. My point is, I am worried that the cynical guy is going to end up being right about it, or at least have more of a point than this one. But at the same time, what's our responsibility? Look, it's happening, and it's huge, and people care about it. We have some responsibility to be there and just sort of soberly tell you what we see. And this is I mentioned at the beginning of the show, dude, this is super unusual. Like, you can feel it. This is not normal at all. What are we supposed to do? Just pretend that's not real and just say, well, this, and listen to only the devil on our shoulder who tells us the most jaundiced worldview things? I mean, we have to acknowledge it, but you have to acknowledge there's this, menagerie of views here all over the place. And I think that's what really makes this interesting. Everyone's got a bit of a different angle, even if it trends maybe one direction. So our job here is going to be trying to find that middle of the road where we can tell both stories and not get caught up in the hoopla one way or the other. But that's going to be a difficult balance, and I understand. If you're hyped about it, I get it. If you're not, I get it. Let's see what happens.
As a journalist, what are you most looking forward to in the build-up?
As a journalist?
Yeah.
Huh.
What are you most looking forward to covering about all of this? I mean, to me, there's obviously the fight, and we know. The one thing that we know, at least right now, barring injury, is that these two guys are going to have, a boxing match on August 26th, 12 rounds, 154 pounds. The rest, I mean, I don't know anything. Like what kind of press conferences will there be? World tours, announcers, Barker shows. Press conferences, all that stuff.
Here's my sense of things. I've covered a few boxing fights. I've been to, Canelo, Mayweather. I went to Mayweather Pacquiao. I've been to Khan versus Peterson and a bunch of other local ones as well. Those are, I think, the three biggest I've been to. And one of the things that becomes immediately apparent when you go to a big boxing event is this is a very different world. Now, it mirrors so many of our own similarities in terms of how the media is and with how they're comprised and how they talk to the fighters and how the fighters know them. Their scrums and all the architecture feels the same. That's why Kevin Iole is so good at going between these two worlds, because there is some overlap in that sense. But at the same time, it's a completely separate cast of people. And the interesting part is jiu-jitsu and MMA has always had interaction. Kickboxing and MMA has always had interaction, maybe less than jiu-jitsu, but still some, right? But boxing and MMA, these have been two diametrically opposed worlds for a very long time. It is going to be interesting to be in whatever media room that we're in, and here comes Zab Judah, and there's Cain Velasquez, and here's Larry Merchant, or whatever, and here is Steve Farhood, where these people who are going to be in the room together who have been on this, I don't want to borrow the terminology literally, but something of a separate but equal kind of track, all of a sudden thrust together. And I think it's going to be, at times, a lot better than we think. At times, it's probably going to be uncomfortable. But it's the meshing of two worlds that have been resistant to each other in a way that MMA hasn't been with its other combat sports cousins. And the contours and the fault lines there are going to be really fun to follow.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that as well. Obviously, the press conferences and everything will be fun. I wonder if they'll do something like they've done it for some big boxing matches where the coaches get press conferences.
Which, by the way, everyone has talked about this. Conor, if Floyd is smart, he will limit his public exposure to Conor because he will just get chewed to pieces. Conversely, however, while I think John Kavanaugh is a smart guy and can think on his feet, you will be surprised at what a nasty character Floyd Sr. is. I remember when I asked him at that very press conference with Freddie, I said, what would you say is Pacquiao's best performance? And without missing a beat, he looks at me and he goes, when Marquez stretched him. And everyone in the room died laughing. And Freddie Roach had this terrible look on his face. And I remember thinking to myself, oof, that's a tough battle for John Kavanaugh.
Yeah, well, Owen Roddy, who's Conor's longtime friend and training partner and striking coach, I think we'll get a spotlight, put on him in this fight because it sounds like, at least right now, Conor's going to surround himself with the same people, and maybe he's going to bring in some training partners, some sparring partners, etc. But he's going to surround himself with the same people. Is that a mistake in your opinion? Like should he be going out into the boxing world and getting a Freddie Roach or someone like Freddie? I know is a bad example because his track record against Floyd isn't great, but should he be doing this or stick with what got you here, even though it's a different sport?
I mean, who's to say? This is so unusual. What blueprint is there,
Right.
On the one hand, I get it, right? Dance with the one that brought you. Okay. On the other hand, I see your point, right? Get a specialist who can really sort of fine-tune things in the days ahead. But he's got 2 months to get ready for Floyd, who's got, this will be his 50th pro fight, all the amateur stuff. What really is a coach going to add at that point? I think he feels like, if this was a career choice he was making, maybe they might add some pieces, but too little too late, I guess.
It also sort of feels in a way, I mean, you mentioned Floyd's age, Conor's age. Conor's not 30 yet, Floyd's 40. It does kind of feel like an old school versus new school type of thing. I mean, even look at their announcements, right? Floyd's Instagram post wasn't exactly the most, high production value fight announcement or social media post I've ever seen. And then you got Conor coming out there with the picture of him and Floyd Sr. Like the guy is just playing on a different level, and I think he uses social media a little differently. Again, he's younger. Conor reminds me to a degree. Remember when Floyd went from Pretty Boy Floyd to Money Mayweather, and it was really with the De La Hoya fight. And I remember the first 24/7 where he's in a plane, a private plane, and he's doing this with money. I mean, that's when he kind of made that transformation and then became the massive drop to beating De La Hoya, etc. Conor kind of feels like that guy 10 years ago to me. I mean, kind of nouveau riche, doesn't mind flaunting it, but Floyd doesn't really do that as much these days. So to me, it also feels like even if you're not an MMA fan or a boxing fan and just a casual sports fan, it feels like the younger fans out there are going to side with Conor, and the sort of old school, I'm a boxing guy, I don't get this MMA stuff, this is crazy, are going to side with Floyd. You get that sense as well?
I do, but I think people need to realize that the one legitimate element to this fight, the no bull-s, totally legitimate, I get why Conor wants the fight, is this. Everyone's like, well, that's the fight he could get where he could make the most money. That's true. That's true. And obviously is a significant component. But if you really think about who McGregor has evolved into, I've made this point before, but I think it now really bears repeating. He has modeled his development on he has modeled his own development off of Floyd, and how Floyd used to tweet things like, like setting or dollar bills on fire, or it's Christmas and he's pulling out giant chunks of cash from a shoe for no reason, and there's these pithy little statements on social media, and then you begin to see Conor do things like that. But here's the point. I'm not saying Conor aped his style. Conor's very much his own man. But the point being is, what was Conor looking at when he saw Floyd? The yes, the highest paid athlete in sports, but the world's preeminent combat sports star. And I think he's coming to take that spot. That's what this fight is really about for Conor. It's not merely, hey, I can get a bunch of cash. I'm sure, we mentioned before, obviously a significant component. But this is about taking Floyd's place. This is about the guy who he's been watching above him, watching his path, to some extent following it, and now he wants to take it. And so for me, there is this, to your point, new generation of guys that want to see him versus this old guard that have been accustomed to watching Floyd reign. The question is, can the king keep his throne?
Do you subscribe to the notion that Conor has already won? The fact that he got Floyd to take the bait, because Floyd can fight anyone at this point. The fact that he convinced the UFC to allow him to do this. The fact that he is getting paid. Remember, initially, Floyd was saying, I get 100, you get 7 million. And, by all accounts, he's going to make closer to 100 million if this is the pay-per-view success that we expect it to be. So by getting this to become a thing, by making this into a reality, he has won. And then in the buildup, he's certainly going to win because he's going to get a lot of promotion. He's going to get a lot of people talking about him more so than usually. And then if he hangs with Floyd and loses, that's still kind of a moral victory because people are out there saying he has no chance in hell. Like, he literally has no chance in hell. That's what people are saying. And so he's playing with all these, these extra tokens, if you will. He's dealing with gravy now, as opposed to Floyd, who is trying to make history, all that stuff and more. And again, he's the massive favorite and people are expecting him to. But if Floyd goes the distance and wins, people will say, like, what? You couldn't finish this guy? You couldn't finish the 0-0 guy? That's how you broke the history? It almost feels like, so I know sometimes we say this and it's not necessarily true, but he literally, Conor, other than getting knocked down in 10 seconds, doesn't have much to lose here now that he got this done. He made this happen when everyone thought that the toughest part of this whole endeavor was actually making it happen. Do you agree with that sentiment?
More or less. I think that's right. I mean, there's a lot of, let's say, first of all, if he wins, obviously, forget it, right? Yeah. If he loses, but to your point, loses in some kind of moral victory achieving way, I also think you're totally right. If he gets stopped in 10 seconds, that's bad. I also think if he, let's say, quits on the stool after a few rounds or gets real lumped up and then stretched and then, KO'd, they got to bring the stretcher in. I don't perceive these things as likely, but that would be fairly bad for him too. But I also think the big lesson here, if you're watching as an MMA fan, is this guy made the UFC say uncle. Now, the UFC's getting something out of it in the end, okay, but he bent them. And he bent the boxing world a little bit too. Again, not by force, but through opportunity. But, by hook or by crook, he did it. And to watch an MMA fighter maneuver through the sports world and the combat sports world in this way and getting boxing executives to talk nice about him, yeah, because they're going to make money, but so what? You're not going to get them to say nice things unless it's either they're going to make money or at gunpoint. And he figured out the best way to do it. And that, to me, is such an incredible achievement that I never had anticipated, to the point of the beginning of the conversation, that, yes, unless it is a really traumatic finish for Floyd Mayweather, Conor's probably going to come out of this ahead in more ways than one.
Honestly, I still can't get over the fact that 4 years and 2 months ago, he was fighting on the Facebook prelims of a Fuel TV card.
Marcus Brimage. McGregor.
Yes, this guy was collecting unemployment checks. I mean, he was talking about buying a bow tie for the post-fight press conference. He was at the end of the dais, that he had no money, that he was going to spend his 50 G's and then come back quickly to fight again so that he could get more money. I mean, that was 4 years ago. Think about where Floyd was 4 years ago and what he was doing. He was making hundreds of millions of dollars. Conor, it would be like someone on right now, June 15, 2017, fighting on the Fight Pass prelims, and in 4 years from now, fighting Triple G or Canelo. It doesn't seem real. So the fact that he got to this point in less than 5 years, and again, I think baiting Floyd into taking this fight, even though the deck is stacked against Conor, Floyd having to agree and Conor getting paid, to me is a feat unlike anything I've ever seen in sports, honestly. And I don't think that's a crazy statement. 4 years ago, he was fighting on Facebook for 8-8 against Marcus Brimage. And he's making 100 million.
We've seen meteoric rises in sports. But like, let's think about something like so let's say, you pick somebody who went first in the NFL draft or something. Now, RG3 flamed out, but let's say he hadn't, right? Let's say he had kept going, Heisman Trophy winner, and going first or second in the draft. There are these processes already in place that elevate people for them. Yeah, he didn't have any of that. He just created his own path. He just created his own apparatus, created his own stage, his own draft, so to speak, right? Not literally, but figuratively. And then used that to launch himself to the next one, the next one, the next one. My favorite stories in combat sports, I mean this, I don't know why I have like some kind of obsession with it, but it's my favorite thing, because you're starting to see a little bit with Max Holloway as well. These guys who come from relatively humble beginnings and don't have a proper, let's say, scholastic education, but wherever they go, they're the smartest guys in the room. Conor's like that, absolutely brilliant as a thinker, as a way to gauge risk, as a way of how to manage relationships, how to go through the world, how to understand what makes levers pull and buttons ring. That's who that guy is. And so he didn't need an NFL draft or anything else. He just found a way to make himself elevated to this position, which is, in the time you're talking about, I mean, it's a presidential cycle. That is nuts.
And make no mistake about it, this wasn't the plan for the UFC. Like when they signed him and put him in there against Brimage and then Max Holloway and then Diego Brandao, the plan wasn't ultimately to cash in this way. He did this all for himself. He did all the promotion. He built himself up. And then along the way, like with Ronda Rousey, they came along for the ride and put him in the right spots. But this is all Conor's doing. And I do think it's important to note that his team, Paradigm, I mean, he's not represented by, one of these massive companies, a WME or a CAA. Paradigm is kind of a sort of boutique, maybe smaller, setup as far as sports agencies concerned. They do rep football and basketball guys, but they got this done as well. And Adi Attar is one of the top managers in the game, and I do think it's important to give him a shout out because Ellerby gets a lot of praise. I mean, he was there, Adi wasn't. That's a real feather in his cap as well. So I think it's just amazing to see how it's all kind of come to fruition. Now, let's just say this, because that people will bring this up to you, they'll bring it up to me. There have been times in the build-up that we have been negative about this fight. And I'll speak for myself, and I don't want to give you the opportunity as well, because I could just see the comments. Oh, you guys are backtracking. Oh, you guys are saying you're excited when you were crapping on it. When I was crapping on it in the most vociferous way possible, it was right after UFC 205. It was after he broke the record, at MSG, the gate record. It was after he made history by becoming the first man to hold two belts at the same time, all that stuff and more. And what bugged me was that the mainstream sports media could not put what he did into context. They didn't understand what it meant to starch Eddie Alvarez the way he did. They didn't understand what it meant for the UFC to break the record at MSG, the gate record, or the journey that it took for them to get there. They don't understand what it means to be a two-division champion, because it doesn't really mean anything to them. They see it 1,000 times in boxing and other sports, multiple-time champions and all that stuff. And so it was frustrating to me on the Monday after and in the days afterwards that we all of a sudden jumped on this fight and didn't even give us a chance to, break that down, put it into context, digest it. They did the same when Ronda was starching everyone and they wanted her to fight Floyd, and that was really ludicrous. And then they did the same with Conor. And then I do believe that people saw that, and that's when this thing started to become a reality, and they ran with it, all that stuff and more. So anytime you go back and look at our comments, to me, I think we would both agree we would be just as excited if Conor was coming back to fight Khabib or Tony Ferguson or any, Jose Aldo or Max. I think we're excited at this juncture to just see this man compete because he's that damn entertaining. Now that it's here, yeah, let's jump along, let's cover it, let's do our jobs. But I don't take back anything that I said about, the making of this fight, because when you are looking at it from a Nevada Athletic Commission standpoint, from a sanctioning standpoint, it does defy all the rules. It does defy logic, right? I mean, it doesn't really make any sense. It's something we've never seen before. So I just want to throw that out there for anyone who's going to say that we're backtracking or doing a 180 or anything like that. And I'll give you the opportunity as well, because when we said it after 205, when we said it in January or whatever other day you want to bring up, I do think it was accurate at the time. And as we've learned, crazy things happen. As I just said on the Dan Patrick Show, the great Vince Scully once said, in a year filled with the improbable, the impossible has happened. And we could not take into account John Jones, Brock Lesnar, MSG, Ronda Rousey, the sale, and then the drop-off in 2017. We could not have predicted the drop-off. And I think that if you ignore that and just say, look, it happened. Well, no, certain things had to happen for this to happen. And now here we are because of the year that they're having in 2017, which we could not have predicted.
I think that's a fair recitation of what you've said and what your views are. I mean, look, let me just say something. Like, think of your worldview as a series of concentric circles, and at the very core are the most basic, essential values to the way in which you view your own life, ethics generally, both your personal ones and the ones that you owe to other people. And as it goes out, the views become more malleable, and they grow, not quite as important to you, right? So at the very end, I like ice cream. In the middle, being kind to others or something is sort of a bedrock value. My point being is this: if you live in a world where, as events change, your opinion doesn't, there's probably some serious questions you need to start asking yourself. Now, I don't think I've done a 180, but I've probably done a 90, maybe 100 a little bit, something like that. And what I mean is, are you asking me, do I think this fight is ludicrous? Of course I do. I think this fight is ludicrous. A guy who is 49-0, but on his 50th fight, is going to be fighting a guy with not one round of professional boxing experience. How did an athletic commission sanction this? I don't know, but they did. Dana White has talked a gang of shit about Floyd Mayweather, calling him racist in the past, and all manner of terrible things. The guy is a literal domestic abuser, has been convicted in criminal court as a consequence, but they're going to hop into bed and do business with him. And then on the other side, you got Floyd Mayweather, who has said any number of disparaging things, including, through homosexual innuendo about mixed martial arts, and here he is fighting one. And then you got Steven Espinosa, who lost Showtime, or she lost Strikeforce because of the Zuffa purchase, and that was not amicable, let me assure you. And he has been, I know, is not necessarily all that happy with the UFC, and they're up there high-fiving. This is the craziest shit I have ever seen in my life. How is my opinion not going to change a little bit? How are you not going to look at that and say, I'm shocked? I'm shocked. I am literally shocked that this is happening. And moreover, when it first happened, there wasn't a lot of smoke to it. It was the opinion clown merchants on the various talk shows who were parading this as something just to discuss. It then took on a life of its own. This is the most unusual fight I have ever seen, far and away, in every respect. There's no antecedent that is even close, at least not at this level, that I have been, visually able to be a part of. And so my opinion about the fight being a blowout or, a very likely win for Floyd hasn't changed. And whether the Athletic Commission abdicated its duty, or what the hell it means that all these guys who have hated each other are all getting together, all of that's still in play. But whatever my apprehensions or concerns about it, it's the train left the station. How are you not going to watch this and say, I guess I got to pay attention to what happens, and what does this mean, and what are the implications? These are unprecedented times for our age. And so if my opinion has to change a little to accommodate that, I don't really feel bad about that. And anyone who wants to just sort of stick their foot in the dirt and say, I'm not moving from this position, all right, you're welcome to it, man. I'm not hating on you. But I live in a world where I have to observe the facts around me and make choices about them. And I got to be honest, these are some unusual facts.
Do you think that this breaks the pay-per-view record set by Mayweather and Pacquiao? Now, I will give you the opportunity to change your mind after 2.5 months of buildup.
Yeah.
But as we sit here today on June 15th, just embryonic stages of this promotion, of this buildup, do you believe that it can break it or no?
At first I didn't. And part of me is still kind of apprehensive. I mean, 4 million pay-per-view buys, that is a stunning amount. But, they did say something yesterday that really caught my attention. Two things. Number one, they kept saying, well, this is what the fans wanted, which almost sounds like they're hedging, like if the fight sucks, it's like, hey, this is what you guys wanted, But at the same time, there's something to be said for that, where, like, it's true. The fans did want this. That's really ultimately why it got made. I mean, yes, Conor McGregor's, vision and everything, but that there is clear fan appetite for this, whether we like that or not. And number two, Steven Espinosa made this point, that you've got boxing fans who are going to watch, and you've got MMA fans who are, probably going to watch. And then in between, you've got fans who are not really boxing or MMA fans, but they're intrigued by what this bizarre situation actually is and will tune in. There might be something to that. This is not something I had, again, here's another point. This is not something I had considered before. I think Steven Espinosa might be onto something. He's a very Harvard-educated guy, right? He's not a stupid person. I guess we'll have to see 2.5 months from now. But my sense is all bets are off, man. This is not a fight that I want to go into making a lot of bold predictions. This is something I want to observe and then figure out some lessons after the fact, because we are truly, truly, truly in uncharted territory here.
Let me ask you this. The UFC has not officially announced the August 19th pay-per-view. Of course, we know that's the show that they wanted Demetrius Johnson to headline against originally Ray Borg and now TJ Dillashaw, and there's no real resolution to that mess. But now that this has fallen on August 26th, originally they were hoping for September 16th, do you think that they should scrap that pay-per-view, or maybe turn it into a free show to use it as a vehicle to promote this event, or use this as an opportunity to delay things with DJ and try to figure out how to make that situation right? What do you think they should do with this show on August 19th?
Pay DJ what he's asking, turn it into a free show, use that free show as a vehicle to promote the 26th. I'm sure there'll be plenty of people promoting it on the in the days and leading up, but that's a great vehicle to do that. What's the whole point of the UFC allowing Conor to take this fight? Because they're going to get their cut. How much of a cut? We don't know exactly, but they're going to get their cut. And that's going to be substantial. So you're going to make some of your financial goals probably through this. And maybe you even set the record, yeah? So do you really want to potentially ruin a pay-per-view or bury it by putting it in such close proximity when you can just make it a very palatable thing by turning it into a free television promotional vehicle? You're going to get your money a week later. There's no need to do it. Make it a free show. Give DJ a little bit of extra raise, and let's move on with it.
If you're Oscar De La Hoya, how upset are you today?
Bitter.
Do you feel like this will significantly hurt their pay-per-view on September 16th? Triple G Canelo?
I do. I think it'll still do well. But that was a fight I was looking at and thinking to myself, man, that might do 1 million buys. And to be clear,
I thought more, to be honest. I mean,
yeah.
Chavez and Canelo did 1 million.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Let's say 1.5 million or something, 1.2 million, 1.3 million. And I still think it can probably do that. UFC 100, UFC 101 both cleared 1 million, but that's different. That's still a total of 2 million buys or so, or 2 million and some change. This one might do 3, maybe 4, right? I mean, this is, or I don't know. I don't know what it's going to do, but certainly have to at least consider those possibilities that will do it. And 3 weeks later, man, that is going to be tough. That's going to be really tough, and it's going to be in Vegas again. Now, Vegas has a lot of carpetbaggers who just show up for fight week, so I think they'll probably do just fine at the gate. But yeah, if you're Oscar De La Hoya, I think this is maybe partly what he was concerned about. Oh, this fight will ruin boxing. Well, I doubt that. Here we are 2 years after Pacquiao Mayweather, and everyone wants to see this again, an even worse version of it to an extent. And I don't buy that, but I do buy that it significantly impacts his business. And if I were him, I'd be kind of upset too. But I mean, this is another look. You got Conor and Floyd together, two ruthless businessmen. Good luck trying to outmaneuver those two.
And how about this year for boxing, right? I mean, between Joshua and Klitschko, and I know it wasn't a great fight, but the Canelo Chavez fight doing as well as it did. You've got Ward Kovalev coming up this weekend. You've got this. You've got Triple G Canelo. I mean, you've got some big time events in the calendar year. Boxing, in my opinion, is having a better year than mixed martial arts. They're putting on some big time events, and Showtime is in large part, doing a great job, I think, of beating up on its competition, HBO. So I think that's fascinating. Also fascinating. I want to get your take on this. Are you surprised just how sort of laissez-faire the UFC and Dana White are? He said that they screwed up many times before in the past by not, by having a great main event, by not putting anyone on the undercard, building up young talent, things like that. Like the UFC is essentially saying, here's our guy, we're going to make a cut. Yeah, we'll do embedded, but we're just kind of showing up. Are you surprised that they're not using this as an opportunity to feature someone else, get a couple, Stipe Miocic, I don't know, something, and who knows what will change in the last 2 months, but they're kind of just standing back here. And quite frankly, I'm surprised that they're not infiltrating this whole story a little more than they are.
No, I'm not really surprised because they don't know what's going to happen with Conor. If something bad happens and another UFC fighter also gets jacked up, what is the point of that? Someone I saw on Twitter was like, "Why not have 2 UFC fighters?" But then what's the point of that? I mean, it doesn't.
Or maybe a show the night before, something like that. Like to capitalize.
Maybe that's not. I mean, a fight the night before is not the end of the world. I think that'd be okay. But I think Mayweather's probably going to put some of his other guys on the show the night before. They did that before Mayweather Pacquiao as well. They had some fights. Yeah. I think it was like that Thursday or that Friday. I want to say the MGM as well, but I got to go back and check. But in any case, they might be already planning to do that. It just seems to me like they want to put their energy behind Conor. And look, there might be a contractual question of what they're even really allowed to do, given what control Showtime has over everything. So I think they're probably saying, we'll just work with what Showtime can give us so we don't have to. Remember, like, these negotiations went fast. It just sounded like everyone wanted to get this done. And if it meant giving a little territory to one guy and territory to another guy in another direction, okay, fine.
Okay, here's the biggest question of them all. We don't usually do predictions on this show, but what the hell? These are different times. Let's put you on the spot. Who wins and how?
I mean, this is what I've said to everyone who's asked me this, so I'll repeat it here because this is what I'm going to stick with. If what we know about the known world, the known universe, if the way in which we know how it operates properly and how everyone fits in it and what we think and know, or at least what we think we know about Mayweather and what we think we know about Conor is relatively accurate, there's no way he wins. So my pick, given what we know about the universe, is that I don't see how Floyd could possibly lose. Now, lose handily or win handily, knock him out, I don't know. That's a little harder to say, but I just don't see how he loses. But this is the magic of Conor McGregor, yeah? I don't think he's going to win. I don't think he's even going to win hardly any rounds. But the truth is, he is great at making you figure out after the fact that what you thought you knew about the known world was trash. Floyd is 40 and has been off for 2 years. Who knows if that's going to matter? I don't think it will, but there's lots of things I've thought about Conor McGregor that after the fact I've been like, well, that was dead wrong. So if what we know about the world is correct, he has no shot. But let's see if our assumptions are correct.
Buckle up, my friends. This is going to be fun. I feel a lot better, by the way. I feel like talking to you about this for the past hour. So I don't know. I feel like I needed to speak about it. I need to just talk about it. And that's why I'm happy. I know a lot of you are going to complain probably about my mic. I'm just using an iPhone. I don't have a set. I'm using, by the way, I'm using a MacBook. A lot of you were making jokes about my toaster webcam or a potato. These things hurt. Times are tough here. I don't have an elaborate setup, but I'm trying. I missed the old. Here's a scoop for all of you. The next time you see the MMA beat, we will be coming at you from a brand new set. I have seen it. It looks fantastic. The next time, by the way, you see the MMA Hour on Monday, brand new set.
Nice.
So part of the reason why we're away is they're doing a lot of work for us over at the new studio over there. So things are changing, but we still kind of feel, I kind of feel like I need it for myself, and I hope that you enjoyed it as well. Not you, Luke, but the people at home. Luke, I hope you enjoyed it as well. Just talking about all this. It's very, very rare. In fact, I don't think it's ever been done on our particular show, 150 plus episodes now, where we devote the entire show to one subject. But I feel like this was big enough. And right now, while there's a lot going on, we've got the UFC in Singapore with that fantastic main card, Holly Holm against Hoya and Colby Covington and Dong Young Kim and Rafael dos Anjos moving up to 170 against Tarek Safdie, and of course Andrei Arlovsky against Marcin Tybura. It's a great card. We just had the Auckland show and Derek Lewis retiring and Mark Hunt. The Demetrius Johnson situation is still very much a fluid one. John Jones, Daniel Cormier, there's a lot going on, but I kind of felt like we needed to devote the entire hour to this because, as we've said multiple times now, unprecedented. A lot of us thought it would never happen. This is kind of still all hard to very much digest. It all feels very surreal, but I think it's fun. I think it is. I think if you're a fan of spectacles and combat sports and things like that, 2.5 months, it's going to be over. So why not just kind of enjoy the ride? If you want to buy it, great. If you don't, it'll be over in 2.5 months, and hopefully some sense of normalcy will return to both the worlds of boxing and MMA. For now, the circus is very much in town, so try to enjoy it while you can. Any final thoughts, Luke, before we go?
No, I think that's right. I mean, imagine if this was 6 months from now. This would be unbearable. But it's 2.5 months. It'll be okay,
All right, so that does it for us. Thank you so much for watching. We're back next week with our usual programming, MMA Hour, live chat. We'll also have coverage from Bellator at MSG. Wow, I can't believe that's coming up in a week and a half. Insane times. But for now, we shall say goodbye. Appreciate you watching. Enjoy the build-up to Mayweather-McGregor. I am Ariel. He is Luke. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend and enjoy the fights.